Hello, podcast listener. First and foremost, I'm glad that you're here. And if you haven't gone through some old episodes of JJ Meets World, I definitely recommend you do so after you finish this episode, in which Tucker and I get pretty deep about the economy, hiring, teachers, and of course, how much ketchup is being put on burgers nowadays. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is! He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
Tucker, last night I waited 2 hours to get into Texas Roadhouse. 2 hours.
Wait. Okay.
At 6 o'clock, they've got an app where you can put yourself on like the waiting list. And at 6 o'clock, I put myself on the waiting list and they're like, fantastic. It's a 1 hour wait. I'm like, okay, that's fine with me. So I put that on because we were planning to meet at 7 o'clock with my dinner party anyway. We all get there by 6:45. You text the word here to a text thread that creates. And I'm like, okay, we'll just wait. We'll wait.
Wow.
We will wait.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden it becomes 8 o'clock and my fellow diners go in and they're like, hey, what's going on? They're like, we're so sorry. You know, like we understand that you've been waiting longer. And at one point my wife was like, you know, we saw a family who was waiting with us out there go in, they ate and they left. And we haven't been seated yet. And it was a party of 3, so it wasn't even a huge party.
How big was your party?
Three.
Okay,
3 of us.
So
and the family was like 7.
Oh, got it. So the family wasn't a party of 3.
Right.
Family was way larger than your party.
Correct.
So by you would assume that it would take them longer to get done.
So
how are you such a tired boy?
I got 2 shots yesterday. I got my flu shot and my COVID booster yesterday, so I'm really wearing thin.
Do you think it's the lighting in this room too?
It is. 100% because I wasn't yawning out in the car.
Well, we're going to be moving studios here in like 2 months.
Oh, are we?
We are. And then I'll see what I can do about a new lighting setup because it's going to be in a different building.
I mean, even just a little natural light.
No, I agree. I would prefer a different lighting setup. But sorry, you continue yawning.
So we finally get in there and we find out that there's been a mistake, right? So we have been on this list the whole time and they hit the wrong button and we've just been behind. But we finally get in there and we have our meal. And my 2 fellow party members were pretty like, you know, they're like, I can't believe this is ridiculous. And I was like, listen, we had a great time chatting. Like a phenomenal time. We had some laughs. One of us smoked a cigarette. Not me or my wife.
Yeah, like, who are you with? I think I know who you're with.
So we finally eat and we have like a good meal. I had buttered corn as one of my sides, which I thought was an interesting choice for me.
Oh, okay.
You get buttered corn.
You said that so declaratively.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to respond to
Would
that.
you ever, like, if you were at a steak place, would you ever be like, if you see that you've got all these side dish options, would you ever choose buttered corn?
So it's loose buttered corn or is it corn on the cob?
Loose butter. It's like in a dish.
I wouldn't get canned buttered corn. I would want on the cob if I'm going to order at a restaurant.
So Tucker, you're an on the cob man. You want to eat it off the cob.
Yes. I want to eat it when it's on the cob.
Okay.
So from the cob.
Name another fruit or vegetable that you insist on having the whole thing of. So, for example, if apple was like a side dish,
right?
Like, would you want the whole apple core included?
You
I would want like an apple on your plate.
I would want a cool, crisp, refrigerated apple.
Refrigerated.
Well, so that's crisp, right? Because you need to put it in the crisper to keep it really nice and crisp, right? But I would also want it to be honey. What's it called?
Honey crisp.
Honey crisp.
You just want a crispy apple.
I just want a crispy.
Man loves a crispy apple.
I want that crunch, but I also want the juice dribble, and I want the cooling refreshingness of it because it's like taking a cool drink of water almost, or apple juice really, with some crunch to it. But I've actually left the era of biting into an apple. I would also say, please bring me a paring knife as well, because cutting it off and then eating that is actually way better.
Very satisfying to you?
Not only, well, it's not just satisfying, you don't get it in your teeth. You just don't. And that's the thing that I'm trying to avoid, because I've got good spacing between my teeth. That's what my dentist has always said. So I never needed braces. There were always like, hey, every other thing in the genetic lottery you lost on, but you won on not needing to have braces, right? So that also then means if I'm eating something with a skin, I will often get it in my teeth. So I'm always carrying in my backpack, flosser, picks and stuff, and excuse myself to the bathroom so I can go take care of it.
What's interesting about that
also keeps me away from popcorn and movies if I can help it.
Which really, interesting.
If I can help it, yeah.
I had 3 fillings done last year on the top left side of my mouth. Apparently because I didn't go to the dentist at all during the pandemic, and so I probably just waited too long, and I could have maybe gotten something done. But he goes, yeah, you got 3 fillings. After I got those fillings, I cannot stop junk from getting in it, like in between 2 of my like molars, and it compacts so quickly in there that it brings me pain on a regular basis.
Yep.
And so I also have to carry around dental floss and flossers and things like that on a regular basis. And so I was just at the dentist, and I complained about this. And he goes, nope, it's your teeth are spaced out for an acceptable. And I'm like, well, whatever you guys did when you did these. And I was also like, one of them is also sharp, like a filling is sharp. He's like, no, I'm not feeling anything sharp. And then all of a sudden he goes, oh, yep, right there. And then he used like a file and filed down part of the filling. And I'm like, for 6 months, that's been cutting the side of my tongue. And
I love how you are adopting the same tone right now that you adopt at a restaurant when you're complaining about the service.
Well, I couldn't get it. And so I switched over to a new dentist. So my original dentist, the dentist I grew up with, was a college friend of my dad's. And then he retired because he got a bad back from being in the dentist stool all the time.
Dentistry.
And he sold his practice to another guy from like Oklahoma. And this new guy was all right. But there was something about him I just didn't trust. Like when he's putting his fingers into my mouth, and like I just didn't trust him.
Did you yawn a lot while you were at the dentist?
No, because there's natural light. There's so much natural light.
Was there at a window you were looking out at a park?
When I switched dentists, it was a big deal because I'd been going to the same place since I was a kid. And then my orthodontist was the same building and same like office as that. So I thought it was a pretty big deal. And so I switched over to another dentist who I grew up with. And now I feel like I need to switch dentists again. How do you choose your provider for something like that? Do you go to the same dentist you've been going to for decades?
Well, actually, no. I need to find a new dentist now because it's been a while for me too. And the last dentist I had kept trying to get me in there like as often as possible.
Oh, yeah, to max out your insurance?
Yeah. So I was like, God, I'm going to the dentist a lot. But they're just, doing regular cleanings. But why so many within so short a period of time? And so I just decided, I don't want a dentist who's going to do that. I just want someone who's going to tell me, okay, it felt more like I was, even though he's a legit dentist, it felt kind of like I was being upsold like a chiropractor will do, where they're like, hey, buy into this package and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah, I just need a teeth cleaner. So I'll need to find a new one. So I'll just need to find someone who takes my insurance.
So here's an interesting doctor story for you. So I never go to the doctor. I'm just not a person who goes to the doctor on a regular basis because I always figure I've been pretty healthy. Last, like March, something was wrong. I knew something was wrong. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to make myself an appointment. And so my doctor listed on my like chart was still my pediatrician. So I was like, I need to find a new primary care doctor. So I do some searching and then I call the hospital. I said, well, this person's accepting new patients, but you can't get in there until, January 2023. And I was like, well, that's not going to work at all.
No.
And he said, well, if you go to a nurse practitioner, we can get you in next week. And I said, yeah, fine. Nurse practitioner. So I go to a Moorhead location, the town just across the river. and I'm able to go there. She's like, yep, this is what I see. Notes that like my blood pressure is a little higher than she wants. And so she puts me on a cholesterol and a blood pressure medication. And bada bing, bada boom, I'm done. Good to go, right? She's like, I'd like you to come back, though, in 3 months and we'll retest everything. So, because I had to do blood work and everything. So I go back and I get a bill from the first one and it's like $500. I was like, that seems like a lot. But, you know, the insurance company, maybe I have to meet my deductible. Maybe there's something going on with that. I'm like, here we go. And I wrote the check, but it wasn't really a check. I paid it online with a credit card so I could get points for Amazon. And so then I go back in July and I have another appointment and this one cost me $600. And I was like, whoa, this is nuts. And I knew my deductible was kind of high. It's like a $2,500 deductible. So I go again to kind of do a follow-up to the follow-up. And I said, hey, this is really expensive. And she goes, well, you know, it's not free. We have a lot of people. And I'm like, yeah, but I spend 5 minutes talking to you and then 3 minutes getting my blood drawn. And so if you can do that 100 times a day, you're making like $500,000 just you. And she's like, if you've got a problem with the payment, you got to talk to our accounting department. I'm like, okay. So then I get a bill for this most recent one. And I notice on my, like, my, I'm not going to, how can I say this? It's a religious piece of iconography and then something you'd use if someone was coming at you with a sword. And they're both the color of the ocean. Got it. Without calling them out directly. And so I notice on this, and they send me a piece of paper. It's not a piece of paper. It's 30 sheets of paper explaining this is your most recent blah, 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 blah. And I had to read through the whole thing. At the very, very end, I find out that I've been L5018'd. And I was like, well, what the hell is this? And it says, we need to know if you have another insurance. And I was like, well, okay. So I get on the phone and I wait for over an hour and a half to talk to a human being. Finally talk to a human being. I'm like, there's this code on the bottom of page 26 of 32. And she's like, oh yeah, we sent a survey to you and you didn't fill it out. And I said, I don't remember receiving a survey. And they're like, well, did your spouse receive a survey? I said, you know, to be quite honest, we don't really talk about our health insurance mailers because you guys send us so much crap on a regular basis as well. What this is we want to know if you had more than one insurance because we don't want to be double paying the hospital. And I said, wait a minute, so you haven't been single paying the hospital? And she goes, no, essentially your insurance has been turned off during this whole time because you didn't answer this survey to tell us whether or not you had another insurance that should be billed instead of this. So I look back and I've spent a good chunk of change. Yeah. And so I said, okay, so I don't have another insurance. This is my primary insurance. And she's like, okay, well, it's going to take somewhere between like 80 to 90 days for us to process this. Bullshit. And then your check's going to come out after this. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, okay, so you have fully declined my insurance. So essentially the hospital has said, hey, this person who has your insurance needs to, this is the things we performed and you should be covering a chunk of this. And they're like, no, but we will keep taking his money every single month. Yeah. We'll keep taking his insurance premium. Yeah. But we will not provide him the services he's been allowed. And also I said, you could have called me. I said, I use your app and nothing there. And she goes, also, because you've been declined, we're going to have to get authorization for this to go against your deductible. Ugh. So my deductible said like, oh, you've spent like $220 so far this year. And I'm like, no, I've spent like $2,000. So my deductible should be almost met. So I can be like, bring me in and scan me and give me everything you can. Yep. And it just grinds my gears on how this institution who constantly is getting like bailouts in different kinds of ways, right? Like there's nothing you can do to control this. Why don't we fight harder for like healthcare to be more accessible to people and to not be so flippin' expensive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Broken system, completely broken system.
It is a broken system, and it's all going to come crumbling down.
Yeah.
Like a mountaintop that got hit with a missile.
You just got to get some kind of autoimmune disorder so that you have to take a medicine that the company then pays your deductible for you.
Yeah.
And then that's what you just need to do, JJ. It's
Be
easy.
like, yeah, I'll just get some of that sweet autoimmune disease. I don't mind paying for insurance, but what bothers me is that they take the absolute minimum amount of effort. And I said, so you sent this survey out and you didn't get a reply, and so that was just it. And she was like, yeah. And I thought to myself, there are people who go on like sabbatical and like spend like 3 months somewhere else, right? And they think they've taken care of everything. Or like my grandfather used to live both in Fargo and then had a place down in Arizona. And so for 6 months out of the year, like his mail essentially builds up here and then sends it, someone would go and collect it and send it down there. But having my insurance turned off without being told anything about it, and the fact that they didn't flag anything, so that they send like a notice being like, hey, like you've had 2 claims and we haven't done anything with them. We need you to get a hold of us right now.
Right. And it's weird that, so the hospital wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have said because it wasn't declined, it just wasn't covered.
Right. And the fact and this is another thing about the hospital too that bothers me, because I paid those bills out of pocket, right? And so if there was a note that said his insurance was declined, they're like, well, it doesn't matter because he's paying it out of pocket.
Got it.
We're fleecing this dude for whatever we can get to begin with. And so I'm looking forward to a nice big fat check in, let's see, we're recording this in mid-October, so right before the new year.
Nice.
It just grinds my gears about that, because a cell phone company will turn your cell phone off if you're 1 day late on a payment, right? But if you lose service because of something that they did, they're not going to give you any money back. The same thing for internet providers. I've had days, and like now that Jill like started working from home, like we'd know if there were days where the internet just didn't work at our house, right? If there was a service interruption or whatever. And I remember calling once and being, our service has not worked all day long. And so they said, oh yeah, we've got some technical issues. And I want to be like, well, yeah, so then you need to credit me.
Yeah.
For the day I didn't get to use this service. Right. They're like, well, that's not really the way it works. I want to be like, if I was 1 day late on a payment, you would charge me a fee of like $75. So can I charge you a $75 fee for not being able to utilize the internet today? And same thing with power companies. For a long time, there's a power company here that wasn't upgrading their equipment in enough time, and so we had these rolling blackouts. And at one point, I wanted to be like, okay, the utility administrator for the state of North Dakota needs to step in and say, hey, listen, you're still collecting people's money, and you say it's the cost of doing business. We can't just upgrade everything. It's too expensive. But then the CEO of your company is taking home $280 million a year. Drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the most overpaid person you've ever met in your life?
Oh,
like that you've actually
name
met.
Drop them.
Yeah,
just name drop that person.
Like, have you ever met someone and you're like, you are way overpaid for what you do?
No, I mean, I've never thought that about someone that I can think of. Yeah. I might have thought like, oh, you shouldn't be in this position. You're bad at this. But if someone's able to negotiate in some way or land a higher paying job, to me, it's more like, good for you. Way to seize an opportunity when it presents itself. So I've certainly felt, underpaid, but who hasn't, right? Who hasn't felt underpaid? And I think ultimately that comes down to the transaction you're doing every single day, where you're going, okay, you're giving me resources, and I in trade am giving you the time of my day and my energy and maybe even my emotional health and suffering. And so at some point you have to do the calculus of, am I willing to do this or not? And I was just saying this to a friend of mine the other day, because a friend of mine is they're contemplating a career change. They're very fed up with their job, and they were going through the motions of like, yeah, I think I'm going to go and I'm going to make this demand, or I'm going to make that demand. And my advice to them was that actually, I don't think you should do that. I think you should quit. You should just quit that job, because you don't have any dependents. There's not really a lot of risk for you. You were already not making a lot of money doing that anyways. And I told her, in most positions when you are the employee, the only real card you have to play is your presence in your employer's life. And so oftentimes when you're negotiating with an employer, the employer is going to be trying to leverage the fact that you need a job, right? That you need to earn an income, and that maybe you'd rather not, you're uncomfortable now, but it'd be more uncomfortable to not have a job, right? And so oftentimes because of that, even the most ethical employer, they're still looking to get you for the lowest cost for their business, right?
That's their position,
right? That's their position. And so they're, and more often than not, they have a lot of people to pick from, right? It's rare for there to be a position out there that's like, oh, you only really have so many candidates out in the field, and then you really can't find a new one anymore, right? So if you can be in a position where if you're unhappy at your job and you're hoping to get something better there, but the job you're at is also just one that's making you miserable, and you have the ability to just straight up quit, I would say go in and say, hey, thank you so much for all this. Here's my 2 weeks notice. I just think it's time for a change, right? And don't burn any bridges whatsoever, because then there may be an opportunity for them to come to you and say, hey, what could we do to make you stay? But you can't threaten it before the fact, because then they're going to call your bluff, right? And then you're not going to get anything. So I think you go in and you just quit. You just say, hey, here's my 2 weeks notice. I can stick around and help you with these sort of things. And it can just be as much as, I think I'm looking for something different than what this job is providing me. I would like to trade my time and energy for something else. You also have to be willing to be broke for a period of time. If you are in a position, right, and this isn't for everyone. Obviously people have, kids, right? Mm-hmm. They've got mortgages and stuff. So this isn't for everyone. But if you are in a position, even with those things where you think, I could tough it out for a couple of months without money coming in, it's worth it to quit your job and just start looking for a new job right away, right? Because then if you even have offers on the table, that's more leverage in your pocket because you have choices now. When you're negotiating with your boss, they're assuming you have no choices. That you're negotiating with them because you want this position. You want to be here. And they're going to go, just like a game of poker, how little can I pay to get you, right?
I think that a lot of employees always assume like, well, this place can't function the same without me.
Right.
But employers also say the same, think the opposite, which is like, you're replaceable. This job probably existed before you and it'll exist after you. And some of my favorite dealings with higher ups have been in a place where I already had another job lined up. And I was like, hey, listen, it's been a good run. And they say like, listen, give us some time to see what we can do to like match or beat, and then we can keep you.
Yeah.
Like, that's great. I appreciate that. And there are other sometimes you have to be fully prepared to go in there and be like, I'm quitting. And they're like, all right, well, hey, it was nice seeing you. Bye-bye.
Yep, exactly. You have to be willing to accept the fate that this is the end of the job. You have to be willing to accept that as well. So really, you're placing yourself in a position where you're moving on with your life. And that does take away that employer's leverage over you when it comes to that. Doesn't mean they're going to come back to you. It's no guarantee, but you were miserable there anyways. You were unhappy with what you were getting. You have one life to live. You should go out and if you can and find something better. So yeah, like it can be really, really difficult to be in a position where you're very competent at what you do. And maybe you've got people above you who aren't, in your view, as competent as you or whatever. It can be really easy to get into a loop mentally where you're like, fuck this place. They need me. They have no idea how lucky they are. You're probably good at what you do, but, don't shine yourself up so high. You live in a world with how many people in it, right? And everyone on some level is replaceable. You may not be a great replacement, but it's a replacement.
I also think a lot of people who are in high school theater have that mentality when they graduate. They'll be like, I don't even know how this program's going to survive
without
me. And I'm like, good news. It will, no
Right.
matter what.
It's just like the sports athlete king who was great was the best basketball player when he was in high school. And then he goes and plays college basketball and he realizes, oh my God, I'm not shit. Right. Getting just stomped on, you leave the ecosystem of the school you were in.
Yeah.
And you're like, I might've been a thing here. And that's why I always remind myself that anytime my ego is even threatening to give me the illusion that I am a big fish in a little pond, right? Which is an illusion, right? That there is no pond. There's only the ocean and we're all little fish. And I think more people need to realize that. And usually when we learn it, it's like an abrupt, painful lesson.
Yes.
But it's a good one to have. It's a good perspective to have.
And I think when you have that abrupt, painful lesson, it's because you have not put your ego in check enough in smaller stages, right? You just let it grow and grow and grow. And I think we allow our ego to grow silently in a lot of times where it's like, yeah, of course, I deserve this. Or why did they get this and not me?
Mm-hmm.
And waiting for that ego check. I'll be honest, I've been able to ego check people before, and that weirdly feeds into my ego. And I've got to be like, listen, put yourself in their position. Like, you just had to take them down a peg or two. You need to remind them that, they are replaceable, that, we enjoy having them as a human being here right now, but it's unreasonable what they've asked you for in some way, shape, or form, right?
Right.
And reminding yourself, like, yeah, listen, the world continues to turn without you, and your peer group will continue to do what they need to do. And in some cases, they actually might resent you after this because you put them in the position of not, like someone else has to do that work until they can find that next person to come in.
Right.
And also, like, your work shouldn't define who you are as a person.
Right.
There have been a lot of nights where I realized, like, oh God, I got to work at 7:30. I didn't leave until 5:30, and then wanted to be in bed by 10.
Right.
And I realized, like, I'm not spending any time at home. I'm letting my work define who I am. And, like, if you have a bad day and you come home and you're like, ugh, I'm now allowing it to follow me.
Yep.
Like a stray cat.
Yep.
And getting yourself out of that mentality and being like, when you walk out and you're done. You're done.
Leaving it at the office if you can. It's so hard to do. I am no good at it yet at all, but I'm working on it as best I can. I have good weeks and bad weeks. But also I think part of that comes from living alone, right? Because when I go home, my cats can't give me feedback on this problem I'm having at work today, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes, you really have to try to put up a hard barrier, especially if you're in a generative field where you're trying to make a thing right from scratch.
I've had days where both my wife and I have a bad day and we both want to talk about the thing that's going on that was bad with us, but neither of us want to give up the space to just be the listener then. And so it's like, well, yeah, this happened. Oh, well, if you thought that was bad, well, wait till you hear what happened to me. And I've worked on this a lot with my own personality to be like, listen, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to make sure that I listen to what, is going on with other people around me. And, and sometimes it's nice because it reminds me, like, hey, my problems aren't that big. I was going to complain about something, but it's nothing compared to what you had to put up with today or the level of this. Now, I will tell you this. I asked you a question that began this about who's the most overpaid person like that you've ever met. I know somebody who runs a nonprofit in town, and I'm like, you're way overpaid. Way, 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 way overpaid. Because I don't see you changing the world as you keep promising. And you're always complaining that you can't find good people who are going to stay like at your nonprofit for long enough. And it's like, well, if you halved your salary and spread that out amongst, all these people here, you would actually have people who are dedicated to your space. Where the lack of employees just in general across the board is causing businesses to shut down and things like that. And I will be the person who says this. If I owned a Taco John's and I was part of like a group, right? So we invest money, we buy a Taco John's, we hire a manager, that manager hires staff, they open this place. At one point, as an owner of a group owner, I'm not going to go in and run that Taco John's, right? Like I hired a person to be in place to manage this Taco John's. And if they can't get enough employees and that Taco John's has to be shut down for 3 days out of the week, now you don't have as much profit coming in as you used to have. And so you can't offer more per hour. And it's this vicious cycle that just leads down the drain. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't have a livable wage and they shouldn't be paid what they are, but the consumer needs to understand that so this Taco John's can be open on a Saturday, we have to pay our workers a minimum of $18 an hour, which means that your crunch wrap gordita is now, instead of being $2, is going to be $5. I mean, that's the way the economy works.
Yeah, but I mean, at this, and we should hope to. I would gladly pay higher prices for goods if I was assured that was because all the people who were putting the labor into making those goods were actually making a fair wage. I'm not an economist, so identifying what that fair wage is, the number itself is supposed to be, I think is hard for me to calculate. I think it's true that no one is owed a job, but I also think it's true that no job is owed employees. And it's typically the owners of businesses who we hear from who say things like, you can't raise the minimum wage or you can't do this or that. It will impact my business. Well, your business is a mathematical formula that you generated that has a cash flow going through it. And if you made one banking on the fact that you were going to underpay people, that you were going to make all of your profit based off of paying your labor less, you are running a shitty business, right? It's the same thing whenever I hear a business owner say, well, I'd love for my business to work, but just the taxes these days, it's like the taxes were not a surprise. You knew what they were going in. You failed to figure out, millionaires and billionaires are made in this country every single day. And 100,000 or whatever you'd call that, are made in this country every single day. Yes, some of it is unethically made, but some of it is totally ethically made, totally ethically done. And so it kind of grinds my gears to say that, to hear that kind of grumbling, because it's like, yeah, I understand why it's difficult to hire people at McDonald's. That's a dog shit job that doesn't pay very well. So yeah, you're going to have trouble finding people to fill that, right? So I would hope that those higher prices would come from that. And there's got to be some mark that like maybe goes up with inflation or something, right? Like tying it to an economic indicator so that all a rising ship raises all boats, right?
But let me play the devil's advocate here and say, okay, so McDonald's doesn't pay, what you'd want to be paid per hour, right? Mm-hmm. But what are they requiring of their employees to justify that amount of money? They're required to pay you the minimum wage. As far as I know, McDonald's has not even touched the minimum wage in the last 6 years.
I believe they're much above it.
Right? And yeah, it's a job where you leave smelling like fryer grease, but you don't really have to do a lot. It's an extremely flexible, type job where you can get hours if you want them. You don't have to get hours if you don't. You go in there, you essentially do what you're told, you take people's orders, you go from there. Mm-hmm. It's not, incredibly labor intensive for most people. And you probably get some free burgers out of the deal or nuggets. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life if you want nuggets as the thing.
Right.
So to me, one of the aspects is like there are these jobs out there that require very little of their employees so that when they leave, they just walk out they don't ever have to think about it again. Mm-hmm. Right? They don't have to think about their job in any way, shape, or form. And I think that there will always be jobs like that. For example, if you work at a car wash and your job is to be the person who takes a power hose and sprays down the car before it goes in, like and gets the little bit of grime and dirt off there.
Right. No, I don't disagree with a single thing you said. I don't think anything you said is in opposition to what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, yes, let's say you're paying $18 an hour at McDonald's. Great. Awesome. That's really, really great. But if you're not able to find enough people to agree to work at that, we don't owe you employees to come in and work specifically at that, right? It's if we're really adopting free market principles, which is what the conservative side of the conversation always wants to do, right? Well, that free market principle also applies to your competition for how you're paying people. And right now it seems to be that they're struggling to win that argument with people. People are finding other modes of making an income where, yeah, let's say it's, $18 an hour Would I rather be flipping burgers or would I rather be doing data entry? I would rather be doing data entry. I'm not dealing with grease. I'm not getting yelled at by fucking customers. I don't have a manager who's like 10 years younger than me. You know, I'm not smelling
Tucker,
like...
You're going to have to work on your ROI because
Right.
these people aren't going through the
Right.
line fast enough. Now my mom's here to pick me up, but I need to see some improvement.
Right. I would say it's those are jobs that are low on the need for skill, but high on a suffering threshold where you have to go through it. So it's not like employees are owed, I'll work at McDonald's, but only for $25. You owe me that. It's like, well, no, we don't. We don't owe you the rate you want specifically. We need to find one that we're willing to offer that you're willing to accept. It's a meet in the middle, right? So no employees owe that. And yeah, you shouldn't expect to be getting $25-$30 for flipping burgers. That seems kind of silly, right? So I wouldn't go out into the market expecting that. But if I was starting a business, I also wouldn't be, I better get some employees that come in here and work exactly for this amount, because how else am I supposed to make a living, right? And that's an employer who has made the calculus that their profit margin is on the backs of paying, like underpaying or giving an unfair wage to the people. So it's all a negotiation. It's all a back and forth. No one is owed anything.
What's your favorite fast food cheeseburger? They're like, Tucker, I'm gonna bring you a burger, and it can be from any fast food place. Now, fast food meaning that like they hand you a bag with your meal in it, whether you are in the drive-through or like at the counter.
And we're assuming that I'm getting the best experience possible, because all these places can have bad experiences.
Yeah, I'm just asking purely about the burger.
Oof. God damn. It's tough because McDonald's has the double quarter pounder.
You like the
double
DBQ.
The DBQ. I like it when I'm hungover or been drinking, right? Because it's just a calorie bomb, just sodium.
There's so much meat.
Oh, I go into a food.
Why don't they call it the half pounder? It's a double quarter pounder, so it's a half pounder.
You know what? I'm going to say McDonald's because the double quarter pounder is my favorite fast food burger.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean,
do you get everything on it? Are you like, I
just say no pickles.
No pickles.
Yeah. Or I'll take the pickles off. And oftentimes I will put French fries on it.
Nice.
I'll add a starch.
I like that. I'm surprised they don't offer that as something like on the menu.
Yeah, but I think they would.
You want to spuds it up?
My guess is they're not going to season the burger with enough fries, right? I really like putting just throwing a big pile of fries on top and then smashing the burger top down and going, well, let's see what fries made it. What made the cut? That's going to be part of the burger eating.
Imagine a world, though, where they have figured out, like, essentially they've got like a cutter, like a cookie cutter, and they lay a bunch of fries out in the cookie cutter. So you get a perfect fry to like meat ratio. So in every bite, there's like crispy fries with it. Mm-hmm. And then the fry tops, so like the tops and bottoms that they've cut off.
Yeah.
Those all are going to orphanages so that they can get some delicious fries. Not the full fry, but like something's better than nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I go back and forth because sometimes I like the flame broiled taste of Burger King.
Yep, I was leaning towards Burger King, especially just for like hey, give me a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Except Burger King over sauces. Both Burger King and McDonald's over sauce. McDonald's over sauces with the ketchup. Burger King over sauces with the mustard.
Have you ever seen the device that they use to put ketchup on stuff?
I guess it's like a squirt gun or something.
No, it's not. It's not. It's it's an upside down like funnel looks like, and they go and they push a button and then it sprays out like 4 little like ketchup like sprays.
And so like a robot is deciding how much?
Yeah.
I think those
I don't
robots,
think it's a robot. I think it's a human being.
Yeah, there's enough variation where it's a human being.
Because you go like, if they want extra, you give it 2 pushes of the button.
Yeah, there's got to be a way to say just 1 pump of ketchup. I want ketchup and mustard, but 1 pump each.
Could you
please?
actually hold the pump slightly off the side so that some of it goes on the counter and then the rest goes on my burger?
And 1 pump could be a held long pump, so you're actually still getting more out of there because there's always like the residual at the end, or you can pump up. So I really think automation should come in there.
Do you want to know something I think is one of the grossest things on the planet, and I've been fighting it since I was a little kid, is when you have ketchup, like a delicious like Heinz ketchup, right? And you spray out of the bottle and a little bit gets on the top of that and then it stays there. and it becomes like the jelly style, so the cap gets all gross. I detest that. I think it's so gross. And I've had times where like I've pulled that bottle over to the sink and I've like carefully washed it off. So that's good to go. We had an Oktoberfest celebration at my office the other day. And one of the things that happened was people were using this so much and like they were getting mustard on their fingers. So there was like yellow mustard residue on the ketchup bottle. And I was like, I can't use this. I can't use this anymore. You bastards.
Have you ever had to like poke a hole in it? Like you'd have to do like an Elmer's glue one where it's like, I gotta actually Roto-Rooter inside.
Worst case scenario, you go and then some of it comes off with it. And now you've got like when you're dipping your fries or your burger or your chicken nuggets or your
one
corn
point,
dog.
There was like a TikToker whose whole thing was showing how she keeps an immaculate fridge, including her process for wiping off all the condiment bottles after every use and stuff like that. Like jelly, because jelly's going to have a lot of loose stuff that gets on the outside of it. And watching her do this was like watching power washing.
So satisfying.
Or lawn mowing sped up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what also feels really good like that? Selling 6 boxes of VHS tapes you don't want anymore.
Which you did today.
Which I did today. Oh my God. Like as the dude drove away with them, I felt a lightning. Like I was carrying those 6 on my back almost. It was great. It was like going to the bathroom, but one of the good ones, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you.
It felt really, really good.
It's, to me, I love when I need to sell something that I feel has worth. Like it's more enough than like I'm not going to just drop it off at one of the like thrift shops or something like that. Or like the Ark.
Right.
When you've got something that has value and you're able to sell it and you've got that little bit of scratch in your pocket from it and you're like, what am I going to do with this?
Don't get me wrong. I still have plenty of VHS. In fact, I totally forgot to. I'm going to start storing all my Captain Ron's here.
Oh, good.
And we're going to
move.
build a shelf at some point that will be kind of a JJ Meets World shelf that will probably hold a lot of VHS tapes.
I decided I wanted Captain Ron in every variation I could get. So I, of course, have a VHS of it.
Yep.
I have a DVD of it. And I just ordered off of eBay a Laserdisc copy of it.
When does Criterion do a 4K?
I was wondering that same thing. So one of my favorite movies I watched yesterday. So Jill and I got our flu shot and our COVID booster at the same time. I took them both in the same arm. Mm-hmm. That was a mistake.
Oh, it
it's
worked
awful
for me when I did that.
Oh my God. I feel like garbage today. Mm-hmm. Just like my arm is so sore and I get the Moderna one and it gives me a little bit of partial facial paralysis. I have a little Bell's palsy as a part of it. And so I got to kind of work my cheek back to working again. But so yesterday Jill's like, well, we got to watch something before we go to dinner. I'm going to take a nap. It's like, oh, I'm going to watch The Road to Wellville. It's an Alan Parker film. And let me tell you about the cast of this movie, okay? Start off with Bridget Fonda, right? Bridget Fonda, super funny, doesn't get enough credit. Cole Meany, who you might know from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Was he the engineer in Deep Space Nine?
Oh, he was in Next Gen and Deep Space Nine. He was he played Chief O'Brien.
Yes.
Yeah, he played the transporter engineer in Next Generation, and then I think he was chief engineer in Deep Space Nine.
There you go. So he gotta work up.
Yeah.
And then he gets married, right? And he has like a kid with him at one point.
Yep.
John Cusack, Dana Carvey, Matthew Broderick, Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins plays Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of cornflakes, but not the cornflakes we know today. That's his brother, who took the name Kellogg's and the idea for the cornflakes and was like, oh, we're going to add sugar to it and make it more appetizing. Those guys have a very interesting story because they hated each other because Dr. John Harvey Kellogg was all about living like a healthy lifestyle and opened a health resort called the Battle Creek Sanitarium. Mm-hmm. And it was all weird stuff. So you'd sit in a bath and they'd have electricity that goes into the bath and it feels like little fish are biting at you, but people got electrocuted.
Yeah. I mean, they were trying to find different ways to
lead a healthier lifestyle. Fletcherizing was one of them, which was this theory that the more you chew your food, the easier it'll be to digest. And so they have a little song that was like, chew, chew, chew. That is the thing to do.
Is that not true?
Chew, chew. It is to an extent, but they were talking about each bite of food you take, you need to chew 70 times to completely masticate it.
No.
And they're it's like the bird, the mother bird who eats a food and then blah, blah, blah. And I mean, they came up with some wild stuff. And so this movie is about that. Dana Carvey plays Dr. Kellogg's, like one of his kids, because Dr. Kellogg adopted something like 30 children in his life. He couldn't have children himself. And he's just kind of this weirdo. John Cusack wants to open a cereal place. Do you know about Battle Creek, Michigan? Have you ever heard about it? They call it the cereal bowl of the world. So Battle Creek, Michigan, for whatever reason, like in the early 1900s, became the place where like all the major cereal companies decided to make their factories. And like, if you wanted to make it big in the cereal world, which was still pretty new at that time, you went to Battle Creek, Michigan.
It was like the Silicon Valley of cereal.
It was. It really was. So The Road to Wellville, it's an Alan Parker film, and I love it. I've seen it so many times that recently they released a Shout Factory, I think, did like a really good new scan of it, and I got a hold of that. My sister and I used to watch it all the time. This is a movie that I found because I'd be walking the aisles of Take Two Video, and I remember seeing the cover art for this and being like, Dana Carvey, I love Garth. And so I rented it. Very inappropriate for children because it deals a lot with like sexual response and like, you know, sexual feelings and stuff like that. And
how old were you when you got it?
I mean, this movie's from 1994, so probably I was in 4th grade, you know, when I started watching this. Yeah. And they deal with a lot. There's a lot of nudity, a lot of rear nudity on men. So, like, you know, those belts that they used to put on people and they would make you, like, jiggle and they like, this is way less. So there's a scene that's a tracking shot where it goes by, like, 25 old hairy butts and they're like having this done while the character is like walking like around with it.
That must have been a weird day on set.
Yeah. And there are things that I notice every single time I watch it, and it's actually, they filmed it at a place called the Mo Hunt Mountain Lodge, which is in upstate New York, and it has kind of this otherworldly feel to it, right? It's nestled up in the mountains, but there's a huge lake that goes around it. And so I was telling Jill, I'd like to go visit this place, like, and we can stay there. And it's an interesting setup because your 3 meals during the day are included in your overnight. So it's like, oh, I could get behind that. I could get behind that in a big way because I've decided that the one thing that would be really great about being a teacher is being able to eat cafeteria lunch every day and not having to worry about what you're going to have for lunch. Just knowing that there's always going to be hot lunch, or you can have a piece of pizza. Like, those are things that are available to you as an educator.
Best part about being a teacher is you don't have to think about what meal you'll be eating at lunchtime.
You can concentrate on molding those young minds.
I mean, there was a Forum article very recently talking about, what was it, roughly 30% of the teacher workforce in North Dakota is contemplating quitting.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Yeah.
That is bonkers.
That to me is less to do about compensation. I mean, compensation definitely goes into it, but it has to do with parents.
I think so
now,
too.
My whole 2 cents is parents nowadays want to be completely hands off on education, but also want to micromanage it at the same time.
Very entitled, shitty people.
Yeah. And so, yeah, no wonder you don't want to deal with parents. And then you get kids who are just crappy and they're like, well, what are you going to do? I don't know if I told you this, but I stepped in. A coworker of mine had agreed to do a like working in radio symposium for like 5th and 6th graders last spring. And they were unable to do it. And so they said, would you do this? And I said, sure. And so what I do when I come in is I hook my laptop up to a projector and I show them how Adobe Audition works, what we use for JJ Meets World. And I give a bunch of kids like scripts and they record a commercial. And the commercial usually goes like this. Hey, gang, what do you want for dinner tonight? And then everyone in the class yells, pizza. And then one kid goes, I want pepperoni pizza. And the next kid goes, I want breadsticks. And another kid goes, why don't we just have broccoli? No, we want pizza. And it's like, yeah, if you want hot, fresh pizza, you got to call, Mrs. Stencil's class, pizza delivery. And so
It's for 4th graders?
This is for like 5th and 6th graders. I've done it like with young kids. I've done it with kids all the way up through middle school. So they get to act a little bit. They get to see it be recorded in a waveform. And then I let them have choices. I have like 5 music beds. Like, which of these music beds should be on here? And then I have some like sound effects. So like one of them is like a honk honk, and then it's like a semi like, wah, wah. And they're like, use a semi because it's like a huge pizza. It's the biggest pizza you've ever had. So I'm doing this thing, and it's the first class is great. They get into it, they have some fun, and then I'll upload it to YouTube so that the kids can like play it for their parents later. Then the second time, I had a kid who was just the worst. Ugh. Oh man. So this kid won't stop talking right off the bat, and I decide, what he wants is attention, so I'm not going to give it to him. So I keep going, and then he turns to one kid and who's wearing a Guardians of the Galaxy I Am Groot shirt, and he goes, "I'm going to throw you out the window. You're an idiot." Like just not doing anything.
Damn.
And so then I'm like, you know what? That kid needs some positive like reinforcement. I'm like, actually, I really like your shirt. I think Groot's the best character. Like, are you excited because they're coming out with the Christmas special? And he's like, yeah, I am. It'll be fun. Be like, yeah, see, you idiot kid over there? I should throw you out the window. So the kid finally like comes down to the point of where he's been so disruptive that and now I'm like, all right, who's going to come forward and say this? He goes, me. And I'm like, nope, not you. You don't get to do this. And the teacher who's assigned here is not even paying attention. Mm-hmm. She's shopping on Etsy. Like she's just not
paying
attention.
Deal with this fucking kid all day.
Yeah, all day, every day. And so this kid goes, but it's my turn. And I'm like, no, you gave up your turn by being disrespectful to everyone in the class, so they get to do it and you don't. And he's like, this is stupid. I'm gonna slash your tires. And I was like, you know how I know you're not gonna do that? And he goes, why? And he goes, because I can know where you are in this building at any time. He goes, no, you can't. And I said, yep, I'll look for wherever the adults are running away from and assume you are somewhere near there. And he goes, well, you can't say that to me. And I said, you bet I can. I'm going to go back to my real job now. And like this kid was so mad. And I got a call from the principal later saying like, yeah, this kid said that you told him to do this. And I'm like, nope, that's not true. And he's like, oh, okay. Well, I just needed to make sure.
Yeah.
And I said, in fact, I recommend that you remove that kid from regular classroom work and let him just sit in the hallway. Mm-hmm. And see how much he likes being. If he wants to be so rude and doesn't think that he needs the rest of the team of the class to be together, pull him apart and let him see what the world's like when you're on your own, because it sucks. Mm-hmm. And that kid needs to learn that lesson right now. And then, of course, like I'm telling this to other people and they're like, that is completely unfair. What you're talking about is segregation. And I was like, I'm not talking about segregation. I'm talking about a kid who is so mean and so cruel that he's ruining the classroom experience for other kids. He told a kid he's going to throw him out the window.
Yeah.
Like, how is that other kid who's not disruptive and who wants to learn, how are they getting a fair shake at that point? Mm-hmm. So I hope I never see that kid again. Or I do, and I'm like, hey, you're going to have to agree to work for $15 an hour to make this burger.
Right.
And there's no pickles, and I need an extra long squirt of ketchup.
No. I don't know, man. I definitely would turn down absolutely any offer to come into a school and work. Nope, not interested. I'm sure the kids are great. I'm sure if we had a great day, we'd all have memories and stuff. I'm going to forego all of that. I'm good, man. I like kids, but I don't want to be in a position like a teacher where it's like you're very guarded by what you can say and or do, right? Like, I don't want to be that kid's teacher. I want to be the stranger that teaches that kid a lesson when they're being a jerk. Yeah. No, I wouldn't, but the parents would be the absolute worst part. I mean, my dad worked in education forever. He's talked about it. A lot of teachers that I know personally got out of it because these were career professionals who said the entitlement from parents is so bad. Mm-hmm. It's I feel bad for those kids, because they're learning that from them. But my dad once had a father whose son was acting out like really badly in class. And so the principals and my dad brought this kid's dad in. The dad literally said, hold on. You expect me to discipline my son? And my dad walked out of the room. It was like, there's nothing else to say to this person. This kid is screwed because this is his father. This kid is screwed. There's nothing else we can do here, right?
We don't choose our parents.
No. So, I felt bad for that kid, and I felt bad for my dad and those principals in that moment. Like, I think It's not just the teachers, it is also the administrators. In fact, the administrators get it worse because they're often only there for the discipline section of it, right? They're the one who has the power over the student of whether or not they attend that school or not, right? So no, tricky. Never. I would not want to sign up for that. Or I would be like, I would be willing to, but only if there was, the trade-off was awesome. Like, oh my God, I'm making, X amount per year and my summers are off, which is great. I'm going
to inspire these kids.
Yeah. Or not.
Do you remember the episode of The Simpsons where Ned Flanders has to like cue into like a deep part of his past, and he thought he's always been nice, but it turns out he was a terror like as a little kid. And there's a therapist, and he gives him like spanking therapy, and he like intentionally takes little tiny Ned Flanders and he spanks him, and you see like a calendar go by, and he wears a Santa's hat, and then like beach wear and stuff, and he's essentially like he spanks his kid for like 6 months straight. And he goes, "Well, Ned, how do you feel?" And he goes, "Okily dokily." And he has to so
basically
train his brain.
He was physically abused for 6 months. And then the persona he has now is his defense mechanism.
Yep, exactly. And he's permanently locked into it.
Yeah. There's my dad told me about the opposite side of the spectrum from what we're talking about, where there were no holds barred for teachers what they wanted to do to students. So my dad grew up in an era where he was caned once because his shirt was untucked. Right?
Ooh.
Like that was a public school. That wasn't like some Catholic school with strict nuns and priests and shit. That was just a public school where the teacher could do whatever they wanted to do to you to discipline you for whatever reason.
Yeah, and
right?
I definitely don't think that's the way to do it.
No, I don't, I don't agree with corporal punishment as a methodology. I'm sure it would feel great to do that. I'm sure there are people who deserve it, right? But it's just like it's kind of like my stance on the death penalty, which is informed by what Gandalf says to Frodo in Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo is talking about, I wish we could just kill Gollum and be done with it, right? Like just be done with this thing. And Gandalf says something to the effect of, not all who so there are some who do deserve death, right? There are some who die who deserve life. Can you give that to them? If you cannot give life to those who deserve it, then don't be so ready to give death to those who you believe deserve it, because you might be wrong, right? There's no way to undo that. And so I think like corporal punishment kind of goes into a similar place. So if you're going to physically harm the quote unquote offender, right? The one who is, you better be damn well sure that person quote unquote deserves it. But what it takes to get to that threshold, I think, is nearly impossible to set inside of a system. And so those kind of things where punishment is meted out like that is sort of in that area of life. That's the Wild West, where there are no guardrails, where if you're at a bar and you're mouthing off to some stranger you don't know, that's a mistake, right? But we still need to have better tools in place for administrators to just say, yeah, I can understand saying you don't get to hit a kid. That makes total sense to me, right? But that doesn't make sense to say, yep, you can't sequester this kid. You can't say harsh things to the kid. Like there should still be some pretty open road, because you need, some kids, they're people, right? So which means some of them are assholes.
Yeah.
They're just assholes. And, like they deserve what's coming to them, right?
When I was in first grade, I was held at knife point in the playground after school.
Jesus.
Like a kid brought a big old Swiss Army knife and held my friend Andrew and I by knife point you remember how they used to use just giant tractor tires and they turned those into sandboxes and playthings?
You were in one of those.
So we were in one of those. And so he held it. And I'll never forget, because I'm a little guy at that point, and being afraid, and he held it up to my throat, the knife up to my throat. And we had a janitor named Ryan who was a younger guy, and he had glasses, but he was a great custodian. And he I'm looking up at this kid who's got this knife to me, and out of nowhere the sun gets blocked, and it's Ryan, and he picks this kid up who's got the knife by like the scruff of his neck and like pulls him up off the ground. And he goes like, "What are you doing?" And he essentially like, plops the kid down and like keeps his hand on like the back of his shirt and like walks him into the school. And I remember thinking at that point, like, this is a guy who understands what you should do with your physical presence in a situation, right? Like, just yelling at this kid might have panicked him or something, right? And he literally took him out of the situation, and he didn't like slap him around. He didn't beat this kid, but he forcefully took him out of a situation to, to protect us in a way, and then marched him right into the school. The next day, I remember my first grade teacher pulling me outside of the classroom, and she goes, "You're going to go to the principal's office now, and she needs to talk to you. And all you have to do is just tell her exactly what happened, what you remember." And she's like, "I'm so proud of you." And she gave me a big hug. And at this point, I'm like, "Oh my God, what did I do? Like, what happened?" And then I came face to face with this kid again. And the principal, who, by the way, I had an amazing elementary school principal. She was just the bee's knees.
Who was your principal?
Michelle Van Note.
Okay, mine was Mr. Stigman. He was great.
And is it like, I think being an elementary school administrator is incredibly important because they teach you like a lot about how you interact. And so essentially I walk in and they said, "JJ, like this kid would like to talk to you." And he was like, "I'm really sorry." And she said, "Now, he's being taken out of school. Like, he was suspended for a week for what he did." And I was like, God, can you imagine getting suspended like in 4th or 5th grade? What that was like. But I never saw that kid again.
Yeah.
Unless he's listening to the podcast right now, and I don't want you to come and find me and get your revenge.
I think there are two things that are both probably true. Or one thing I know for sure is true, that he did something really wrong.
Incredible, yeah.
And needed to experience consequences for it. I think the other thing that's probably true is that his life probably fucking sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Or probably did at that time. And so like both things can be true, and like a good administrator is going to keep both things in mind. Like, no, you're going to suffer consequences because you did something wrong, and that will not be tolerated, right? Luckily the consequences wouldn't be more suffering for the kid as far as physical punishment, because who knows what happens to him at home, right? But there's got to be something. And at the same time, you can do that with empathy and go, this kid is in trouble.
Right.
In more ways than one.
This action is a product of something bigger than them needing to feel power or something like that.
They're a kid, right? They're a kid. And you do have power over them in some way. But I don't want to, that's just like the same reason I don't want to be a teacher, is because I don't want to be a social worker. I don't want to be a cop. I don't want to be any profession, a doctor, right? Or whatever, that comes into contact with, the daily suffering of people, right? A therapist, all that stuff. I don't want that to be my daily life.
Tucker, I want to end with this, that the inspiration for the song Love Shack was about a cabin in Athens, Georgia that had a tin roof, where the band, the B-52s, conceived the song Rock Lobster, which was a single from their debut album. The cabin was said to have been located off the Atlanta highway near Athens. B-52 singer Kate Pearson lived in the cabin in the 1970s, although it did burn down in December 2004. Cindy Wilson's line, "Tin Roof Rusted," was originally an outtake from a jam session where Wilson continued her line while the tape had stopped. While there had been speculation about the meaning of the line, according to Kate Pearson, it actually just means a rusted tin roof. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. The ketchup gun was invented by a guy who later went on to invent Remington rifles, but his real dream was about condiments.